Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's video is an album review on Norken's 2005 release called Our Memories of Winter. I have a couple copies over here. I originally bought the album came out in 2005. I originally bought it that year, and unfortunately, sometime in 2010, I took all my Norken CDs in a trip with me to California because I was playing a lot of Norken around that time specifically, and you know I had to buy another copy because I ended up leaving it at a friend's house. So that's the reason why there's two copies there. Sometimes that happens when you're a collector and you're kind of a completist, and if you lose something, you gotta buy it again. Sometimes that happens. Um, but Norken was a is by a gentleman by the name of Lee Norris out of UK, and he started producing in the late '90s, and then really actually started releasing in probably like '96, '97. And I first heard his name on Clear Records around that time, and also Hydrogen Jukebox, which I was following at the time, and under the names Metamatic. And he also records under Metamatic, Autumn of Communion, also Notch Plonk, and also Norken. Those are probably his four most popular, most well-known names that he records on there, and have them. They probably have the most output of all the names that he records on. There's probably another five or six that he records on. Some are with other members, like Out of Communion is with another artist. And but he's also known for founding the labels Neo Ouija and also the Text labels, and then most recently into Intellitronic Bubble Records as well in the last few years. So he also released on Carpum Sonum, which is a really popular ambient label. And I first got wind of Norken, the name Norken in 2001, and it wasn't until probably a couple of years later that I found, or maybe a year or two later, I started noticing on Discogs that he was also Metamatic, and so that kind of made me kind of dig back into the Metamatic stuff and also his other names and kind of see other music that he was doing. But Norken has always been my favorite style of his. I think it's the one that sticks out the most. He certainly does all the names that he records under are very strong, but Norken is sort of special to me because um, it's just in some ways he's kind of this particular style of techno that he does. It's almost like if I was to throw out 5 or 10 names that do a certain style like this, he's definitely going to be in the top five, if not higher. He's of this particular kind of techno that he does. It's just when I think of this kind of techno, he's like one of the first producers I think of. Um, and back in 2001, it was this breakout track called Southern Soul, which was actually from 1997, but I first heard it in 2001 on a Red Jerry mix on this compilation called Form and Function off Hooge Tunes Records in 2001, and I fell in love with that track, and I started finding what else he'd been and bought the album that it came from, and started buying releases, and followed him through the next 25 years, um, as well. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna review all the individual tracks and then give my overall thoughts on the album. And I will also get a chance to check out a few tracks. I haven't decided if I'll put some samples in there, but I'll play a few tracks in there so you guys can hear it. Maybe it'll be the top couple tracks that are my favorite. But we'll see. Whatever I feel like playing, we'll play it. I guess that probably come down when I start editing it and putting the tracks in there. But there's 10 tracks on this CD, and it came out in 2005. Also, I recently did just as few as 2 weeks ago. That's kind of the reason why I'm doing this review. Is I'm gonna post down in the bottom. I did an article on this album on Juno Records and the 20th anniversary of it, and also it's being reissued on vinyl, coming out probably this month or next month. So it's definitely a worthy reissue, and it's nice to see that happen and kind of give. So hopefully it helps other people find a copy um, and it'll find some new fans because this album is definitely worth it. And it's one of my favorites by Norken as well. But yeah, so yeah, there's a link down below if you'd like to read that article I wrote. Just check that out. There's 10 songs on here. The first one's called Memories. This is kind of the perfect example of this the style that I like from him. There's always this kind of it's kind of a minimal techno, but it's also a little bit of deep house in there, but not so much house. It stays firmly in techno for the most part, but it also kind of adds some parts of IDM music in there. Not so much with like any kind of jittering beats or anything like that, although there is some broken kind of house beats in here sometimes, like with Norken's music, but mostly it's techno. But there's a certain sort of whimsical or unique thing he does, or clever thing he does with the melody, or the sounds within the sounds that are sort of working itself out and sort of combining. And there's always like a really nice counterpoint to the melody, and then that counterpoint becomes a little odd, or it adds something. He adds something to it, and it adds another layer to it. He always does a really nice kind of like point counterpoint sound to it that kind of gives it like a nice um because it is deeper listening, but it's also there's a whimsical feel in it. So he's kind of hitting on the machine music and the sort of human side to it, but there's also a kind of a stiff side of the IDM beats and the techno beats, but there's always a whimsical part in there too, and it's either the house or it could be some melody sound or just maybe some unique kind of sound that he adds into it. It always just gives it really a nice kind of character for the song. The first track, Memories, I give it 7.5 stars. Excuse me, 7 stars. Very good track. Eastern Soul, which he did. There's a few not sort of versions he does of his classic Southern Soul, like Eastern Soul, and I want to say there's a Northern Soul track in one of his records also. This one's a touch more jazzy, a little bit house with the vocal, but it also has sort of a unique organ on it too. Really strong track as well, 6.75 stars. And then one of my favorite tracks, track number 3 called Thai Canal. A little bit more crunchy beat, but the strings are just epic. A little bit more IDM, a bit broken beat. The machine is almost like weeping. Like sometimes he gets to that point where it almost feels like the machines are so human sounding, and this is kind of a perfect example. Like if you're looking for human emotion within techno music, which is technically sort of known to be kind of rigid. If you're looking for like a lot of human emotion inside techno, this is a great example. Thai Canal, track number 3. I give it 7.5 stars. Let's check out a sample of it. All right, so that was track number three called Thai Canal. 7.5 stars I gave that. Going right into my favorite track on the release called DF23. This is just beautiful. It's the pinnacle of. It's almost like a good example of a pinnacle of this type of minimal melodic kind of sound that kind of treads the line between IDM and a little bit of house. There's some influence there in both, but it stays pretty much on the minimal techno road, and but just also has a lot of ambience in there, and you know, unique sounds. And the only thing I don't like about this particular track is just, and it's really the only sound that bothers me on the whole album, and it happens to be on my favorite song, but it's just the snare sounds a little distorted, and it's probably done on purpose. I'm, you know, probably knowing how meticulous this CD is recorded, it's got to be on purpose. It's really the only blemish on the whole album, in my opinion, of a sound that sort of is a little bit annoying. You can still kind of tune it out because it is kind of that style of electronic music where you can focus on certain things, and if you have selective hearing and you're good at kind of focusing in on something and something else kind of going away, like it doesn't really get to you too much, but it sounds distorted, and I feel like the snare could have been done differently or better, in my opinion. But I do like the melody, of course, and everything's right in line with the rest of the album. And this one, the melody is just so good. It's just awesome. Let's check out a sample of it. right, so that was the DF23. My favorite track on the album. I give 8.5 stars. Such an awesome track. It's one of those tracks when I play it and it gets when I play it on the CD and I just end up playing it for like 7, 8 times. And sometimes that can be a drawback of an album. Sometimes when you a strange drawback because you play like you tend to you pick out a CD like maybe you have an hour of time to devote to it, or you're just, you're picking a. I don't know about you guys, but if I have like a 45-minute drive and I'll pick a 45-minute record, two of them, one for there and one back. Um, and sometimes you get to a track that you just play over and over, and you don't get to hear the rest of the album sometimes. That's happened so many times on Norken records. I just get stuck because in generally the songs are very light 12-inch records. They're all 6 to 8 minutes long. There's not too many 3, 4 minute tracks like Norkin does, so it's not like you're playing a CD and you're skipping a lot of songs. Like if you're 15 minutes drive, you have two songs to listen to, for the most part, and you don't really get to the other tracks and a lot of times, and that's kind of you would think normally that's a bad thing, but it's kind of a good thing too because you're obviously enjoying one track multiple times. And DF23 is a track that I just when I get to it and I hear it, I just keep playing it over and over, and it kind of makes it hard to hear the whole album in one trip or one sit because you end up playing songs over and over and you never get to the end. That's happened so many times on this record with this track. And just DF23, I give it 8.5 stars. My favorite track on the album. The next track is called Here. I'm not quite a big fan of the voice in this song, but it is still creative and it's a nice change of pace for sure. Still a very strong produced, very strong, well produced song. I do like the melody and it's right in line again with the rest of the album, like I said earlier. Everything is really concise and I wouldn't say concise, I mean cohesive, and everything really works together from song to song. I give Here 6.25 stars, and then track number 7, my my second favorite song on the album. Just melancholy, beautiful beauty, just a beautiful song. 8.25 stars, just an awesome song. Let's check out a sample of it. All right, so that was track number 7 called Folio. Just love that track. 8.25 stars. Track number 8 called Flirt. This one's one of the more interesting ones on there, maybe a little bit different than most of them, but not too much different. I really like the atmospheric and the swirling kind of ambient melody part. The beat is a little bit more brisk, and there's some usual kind of quirky sounds and very catchy sounds. It makes for a cool kind of mix of electronic soul and ambient and techno. I give this track 7.25 stars, and then also the ninth track 7.5 stars. I'm sorry, Flirt was 7.25 stars. Night's Mixture, track number 9, 7.5 stars. This one reminds me of the first two Norken albums, Static Blue and Spring Themes. They're the first two records from 1999 and 2001 or 2002. This one was 2005 with his third record. Um, this one's also a touch more focused on the techier side of the rhythm, and it kind of sneaks up on you. I'd probably have to say this is probably my fourth favorite song if I had to choose, maybe fifth, somewhere around there. But also 7.5 stars. There's three tracks on here that are 7.5 stars, and the third one being track number 10. Um, Odic Strabble is called. This one adds a bit more of an acid feel, more upbeat, a little bit different. Ends the album on a strong note, 7.5 stars. Let's check out a sample of it. All right, so that was track number 9 called Onyx Travel. Gave that one 7.5 stars. Really like the moodiness of that record and the deep kind of almost feels like there's an acid line in there, the ambient, really cool. So when I add up the stars for this record, 74 divided by 10 is a 74 out of 100. I gave this album a couple extra points because it's just such a memorable album and the tracks are so melodic and deep and such a well produced album. I give it a couple extra stars, and the final score is 78 out of 100. Very close to getting into the classic for this particular genre in techno and minimal techno. This one's right there on the cusp, but almost getting over into being a classic. The As far as my overall thoughts on it, just the blend of melody, melancholy, techno. Some of it's a little bit icy, kind of breezy, but it's also very catchy, and at the same time, it's kind of chill and kind of relaxing as well. It's almost like an ambient with like a brisk beat. It does a great job of staying clear of like minimal techno, especially in like 2005, which I'm very familiar with in those days of minimal technos and sort of the trends. And this one stayed away from the pitfalls of minimal techno, in my opinion. And it really was helped by the ambience that was really kind of layered over the top, and also the addition of IDM and deep house and so I mean Lee Norken is just I mean he's focused on making underground music. He's not focused on making popular music or big club hits or anything like that. Like he knows his range and he really does a great job in that kind of smooth techno melodic range. Um, it reminds me a lot of Sim. If you guys have ever heard of Sim, CIM, it reminds me a lot of his style. There's a little bit of Detroit techno in there, but definitely a lot of electronic soul in there. Um, in many ways, he was one of the most important artists to put an intelligent and deeper, more emotional ambient sound over techno. Like when I think of like his work under Norken, and just the quality of material there and how many albums there is. Like he's definitely one of the best as far as like putting intelligent, making intelligent techno, making it more emotional, and again that kind of electronic soul, and definitely blending ambient over techno. These What's really cool too is these always I don't know if these really sound. These sound more nostalgic than futuristic, but there is still a futuristic sound in there, and the nostalgic is different than a lot of nostalgic. It's not necessarily nostalgic from a recorded standpoint. It's nostalgic because if you've heard it again, you're nostalgic for it. But it's not necessarily nostalgic in the way that a lot of Detroit techno is, or other emotional techno, because it still is kind of futuristic. But the thing when I think when I, the thing I most think about when I think of emotional techno is the melancholy he puts in here, the ambience in here, and the depth in here. It's just there's so much personality and character in this techno compared to a lot of other minimal techno. Um, it's almost an album that you have to play twice or play in two parts because you're just going to get stuck on certain tracks and sort of it get repeated, or maybe you just kind of zone out and you're really enjoying it but you forget what you're doing, and a track or two passes by and you're like, oh, let me rewind it. I feel like I missed something, and so there's almost that feeling also that you never kind of get a grasp on the whole album as a whole. But it's also because the album's kind of pushing 65, 70 minutes, and which is a lot for an album. And so sometimes it's hard to make a 70-minute album. Uh, wouldn't say memorable, but to uh, to to be able to memorize it and feel like you have every grasp of every change of it. You know, like you generally do with music that has vocals and things like that. With techno, sometimes things are so like minimal and they're so in depth and you get lost that you're like, oh shoot, I got to play this track again because I'm kind of lost where I am in the track, and because it's so it draws your attention so much that it just desires your attention, and you have to give it to them to enjoy it to the level that maybe you want to, or you think you need to, but you almost feel like you have to because you might miss a couple minutes, and even though it's fairly minimal and there's not a lot of changes, right, you do feel like you're kind of missing something, and that's probably just because the music, a lot of the songs are so strong, and just Norken in general. But sometimes it's hard to get, reward yourself and hear the full album because you're kind of playing songs here and there and repeating songs. And it's a very consistent album. But I rarely get to the last track, which is a shame because it's a really great track, one of my probably top four favorites. And it takes things sort of a step further in some ways too. But there's so many songs I get stuck on and repeating that sometimes I don't get to track 9 or 10, and that's a pity because those are probably, when I ranked them, those are probably my fourth or fifth favorite song on the record. Just an excellent album, really really strong album. It's nice to see it's getting reissued, and so I definitely wanted to review it because I got a chance to review it online, and I'll put the link again down below so you guys can check it out. And let's end. Well, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the album if you've already heard it, or what your thoughts are on some of these samples, or these tracks. But I'm gonna end the video with playing out last track called Onyx Travel, just so you can kind of check it out. Um, because I can't remember if I played that one or not. If not, I'm gonna play track number 9 called Nights Mixture. So we'll check out that one. So I'll just name it which track it is, but I'm either gonna fade out into the distance with either track number 9 or 10, Nights Mixture or Onyx Travel. So yeah, check out one of those tracks here, and hopefully you enjoy this review. If there's something of yours that you'd like me to review, or there's some electronic music out there, album or a particular song that you'd like me to review, just email me below, and we'll get that worked out. All right, thanks so much for watching.